Exonation. Our guest this hour is Jennifer McCallum, along with her husband, Dr. John Bird. They have written One Day, One Night Portraits of the South Pole. Their website is www.portraitsofthesouthpole.com. First of all, Jennifer, I want to thank you ever so much for coming on the show tonight with us and sharing your experiences, and for both you and your husband for writing this great book and giving people a more personal insight and more personal look into the South Pole. So thank you.
Well, I'm really enjoying chatting with you.
Thank you, dear. You were telling us before we went to the break that there are people who kind of go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs up there?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
What happens? How do they act? What do you do with them?
Well, I don't think anybody had any good plans to how to deal with them. I think we had to, I had to deal with it myself. I remember, I remember one fellow in particular. He was a really nice guy during the summer, and as soon as the sun set and the station the station closed. So that was before the sunset. But he turned. It was kind of like a dark mask went on him. And I remember one day I accidentally spilled some garbage out in the walkways, and so I was trying to figure out if I had done it or not, and I was told he was the person to talk to. And then I remember in front of everybody in the dining hall, he said to me, "You spilled the garbage on purpose." And then people started tittering, and people thought it was funny. And then the fellow who was in charge of safety Ryan, we called him, he looked away from me. And it was scary, and I think and just lots of little things. Like I remember when we were planning the rescue, that was a huge logistical effort to have the plane land at the South Pole. And I remember one of the guys saying, "Oh, that'd be really interesting to have mass casualties."
You've got to be kidding!
Oh,
my
dear.
gosh! My gosh!
It was just a lot of people. People would just get really moody, and you wouldn't be sure what to do. So a lot of us, while we had some really nice social times, a lot of us spent a lot of times kind of hiding in our rooms, doing things on our own, or with small groups of people.
Tell me about the long green bean affair.
Well, all right, that kind of illustrates my craziness. I was a little crazy too, I think. Anyways, there was a small group of science folks on station who late at night would cook up really fancy meals, and one of their favorite things was long green beans. And so they used them up, and then they ordered some more. We had a storage berms, and so they ordered some more to be delivered with heavy equipment back into the dome, and we unpacked them all. And I remember the kitchen supervisor, my boss, being a little bit perturbed because he hadn't ordered any of this stuff. Anyways, we put it all away, and then not long, maybe a week or so later, I went looking for the long green beans, and they were gone. And I remember I was like, oh my goodness, I got so mad, and I went pawing. I looked everywhere, and I found those long green beans, and I went marching back into the other cook I worked with, and I said, "Tim, I found those long green beans." And he said, "Okay, well, what does Andrea hate?" Jen is like, "Well, she doesn't like mushrooms and she doesn't like onions." So he's like, "Okay, well, we'll cook up the long green beans with onions and mushrooms and see." And I said, "Great, we'll see how she likes that." And then I went and hid all the rest of the long green beans.
What was it like being the lowest on the totem pole?
Well, it was a really interesting experience. I was, feeling pretty good about myself, being a master's student and an academic, so there's a little bit of prestige there. And then, I land at the South Pole, and suddenly I'm in this kitchen working harder than I've ever worked in my life, struggling with altitude sickness, and I found it. At first, I was really quite resentful, and found myself like, this is terrible. But then I thought, you know what? Washing dishes for a year is going to be really good for my character. And I found once I changed my attitude, I I started being able to, like, I remember the other dining attendant I worked with, I think she was frustrated too, and she wasn't even that nice to me, but then it seemed I became open, and her and I got along great. My supervisor, who, didn't really want to deal with me too much, I finally approached her outside the kitchen, and we established a very nice relationship. And then I found, there was people who liked me for who I was, and and certainly the music side, that was just wonderful. And then there's people who didn't think so much of me, and I kind of became okay with that. Although I went through a crisis in the middle of the winter where I was getting quite picked on and pushed around, and so I really felt like I was losing it. And I really, in the previous winter, a cook had quit. In our winter, one of our cooks almost quit, but we had a tight enough family sense with the two cooks and I, it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. But I really felt like I was losing it, and I realized I had a responsibility at the South Pole to take care of myself. So I wrote a speech, and with my knees shaking, got up and told people how they needed to be treating me and what their responsibilities were. And then after that, and the kind of the most respected person in the community, kind of like an elder in a First Nations community type person, mm-hmm. he stood up and publicly said, "I support you," and that turned my winter around. So being lowest on the totem pole, I think, is something that stayed with me, and I think it's helped me treat other people with better respect. I think I learned a lot from being in that position.
All right, I have to ask you an honest question. You ready for this one?
I'll see.
All right. What was the food really like at the South Pole? What kind of dishes would you serve out to the other people that were there?
Well, the food was pretty normal.
Really?
we had, everything was frozen mm-hmm. that we were working with, save for, we did have a small hydroponic greenhouse and had, salads every 2 weeks and herbs we can put in salads. But it's amazing what you can do with frozen food. And so I would say it was pretty similar to, say, like kids going to camp or cafeteria food. So it wasn't terrible.
What did you have any need of money down there?
Only really to purchase, there was a lot of drinking down there, so people purchased a lot of alcohol. And then if you wanted to buy souvenirs, I spent a fair bit of money on souvenirs. But other than that, no, you really didn't need any money.
Did you see any of the local wildlife while you were down there?
Well, not at the South Pole.
Mm-hmm.
The only actual wildlife at the South Pole is really hardy amoebas. But John and I did go for a week of vacation to the coastal beaches of Antarctica, and I remember actually we were wandering around in our T-shirts in -5. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. and there were penguins there, and one of the most striking images I remember was this. We went on an ice cutter cruise. They kept Polies very busy because apparently Polies would get in trouble when they were on their week of vacation. But anyways, we went on this fabulous ice cutter cruise, and while we were out, we saw this circle of emperor penguins, and they reminded me of Druid priests at Stonehenge. It was such a phenomenal picture.
What do you think the penguins thought of the Polies? Here we go again. Oh, these two are from Canada, eh?
Yeah, eh? I don't think the penguins were thinking about us. I think they were not wanting to get eaten.
How about was there a lot of jokes and pranks pulled on each other down there for entertainment?
Well, yes, there definitely was pranks. I think one I can remember in particular was the carpenter foreman. He fell asleep on the couch in the galley, and then we had this really large stuffed dog because we're not allowed to have animals down there. So we had a very large life-size stuffed dog that was our pet, and so we put the dog on top of this guy sleeping, and then we took a photograph of it. So that was pretty hilarious.
We've got about a minute left, Jennifer. What are your final thoughts for the X Zone Nation tonight about your visit down to the South Pole?
Well, I think that's a very grand question. I think it was incredible being down there and seeing the science, like at the dark sector with the radio telescopes. They're probing the beginning of the universe. They're looking at the cosmic microwave background radiation, and they're figuring out the parameters of the universe and looking at dark energy and dark matter. And then there's Ice Cube, a telescope looking straight down and looking for high energy neutrinos. And I think they're on the verge of major breakthroughs. So it was just really incredible to be down there. But also there was a sense at the South Pole is that we're fragile, we're human, we're moody. Yeah. I remember there was nights I'd be out looking at the aurora, and it was almost like I could hardly feel it because I was so caught up in my own negativity, or just being human. And I think I really want to share with people just our intimate experiences. Like it was just one of the harshest places to be, but yet it was one of the most magical places on earth. And so I think our story, we're really trying to share our humanness, to be honest amidst.
Well, Jennifer, we hate to do this.
Overwhelming.
We hate to do this, but we've run out of time. I want to thank you so much, and congratulations to you and John for a great book. And X Zone Nation, the name of the book is One Day, One Night, Portraits of the South Pole. The website is www.portraitsofthesouthpole.com. I'll be back after the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour. Don't go away. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Gwilda Wiyaka's latest book, The Science of Magic, Book of Mysteries, Volume 1, is the first book in a series based on her writings that open every episode of the Science of Magic radio show. Drawing on the subject matter of each guest, and armed with over 40 years' experience in shamanism, 35 years in alternative health, and degrees in psychology and religious studies, Gwilda introduces relevant and leading-edge information that supports spiritual evolution and personal empowerment. Rich with wisdom and inspirational quotes packaged in digestible segments, this is a book that will pull you from cover to cover. It will also serve as a daily inspirational reading for years to come. The Science of Magic Book of Mysteries, Volume 1 is available at our website, tsompublications.com, amazon.com, and wherever fine books are sold. Back in Victorian England, a famous theologian posed a perplexing riddle. Why are the two top personalities in the Bible tagged with the numbers 7 and 11? Academics agree the answer is found in the stunning discovery of a hitherto secret Bible structure explained in a new book called The Genesis Grid. The discovery is so simple that preschool children could illustrate it. Certain claims are hugely controversial and may offend some, but at the X Zone, we've studied this awesome new book and agree with one expert, and I quote, "These discoveries appear to be beyond coincidence." So who or what hid this wonderful pattern in the Bible, and what might they do next? Find out more, X Zone Nation, and read reviews on www.genesisgrid.co.uk. That's www.genesisgrid.co.uk. Jennifer McCallum is my guest, www.portraitsofthesouthpole.com. Did you ever have an awe-inspiring or awe moment while you were down on the South Pole? And if so, can you share it with us?
That's a good question. I think most of my real awe moments happened at very ordinary times, and that's, for example, I'd have a difficult day, or I'd be feeling frustrated, or that sort of thing, and then I would walk home from work. I'd leave the galley. I'd walk through the underground archways that had the smell of JP8 fuel. And then I would fight with the door latch, which was always frozen, and I would push and shove and try to get it open. And sometimes it would suddenly open, and I'd fall through the door out onto the Antarctic plateau. And then suddenly I would just quiet down. My soul would quiet, and I would look up, and there would just be this incredible aurora, or just all the stars, and it would be like I was suddenly in a celestial temple. And I would say repeatedly, that was the most incredible experience at the South Pole.
You're flying into the base on a Hercules. You get off the aircraft and you realize that you are standing at the bottom of the world. What did that feel like?
It was very overwhelming, and I remember when we touched down and we were all crammed into the Hercules aircraft. These aren't fancy commercial liners. We're all sitting on web seating, our knees pushed together, and somebody marches back. The crewman marches across our knees, and then he unlashes our luggage, a huge skid, and he shoves it out the back of the plane. So that was and that was shocking. And then when I tried to stand up to walk out of the plane, I could barely walk because I was so over the weight limit. I had shoved all kinds of heavy stuff in my parka pockets and my carry-on, so I could barely walk. And then once I got to the plane door, it was like all these black flies with razor teeth swarmed me. The cold was astounding. Like, I didn't know it was possible to be so cold. But once I got off the plane, I stopped, and we were at high altitude, so I was really out of breath, but I stopped and looked around. And it was probably the most incredibly beautiful sight I'd ever seen. And so I fortunately got a ride to the dome, which itself was incredible to see. It's an iconic building, a silver geodesic dome.
How did you prepare yourself physiologically and psychologically for spending a year down in the South Pole?
Well, I hate to admit, but they don't really prepare you.
Wow.
Yeah, so also we didn't have a lot of time to prepare. We had about 2 months. So I was in the middle of my schooling. John was wrapping up a job studying ozone at the North Pole. So we had to run around like mad, get all our stuff stored, figure out our tax situation, just lots of really mundane details that had us running like mad for 2 months until I left. And then I did go to Denver, Colorado. We went, John, I got hired first because John was waiting to make sure I got a job, so I was officially hired. So unfortunately, I was the only one who went, but I did go on an outward bound course for a weekend with other hirees. But that's about all we did. And we did do psych testing, and both of us had to do extensive medical testing. But in terms of really preparing, really understanding what it was all about, what kind of supplements we might need, that was really quite sorely lacking.
What was living there like? What were the living conditions? How did you do your laundry? What kind of TV did you have? How was the internet?
Well, John and I had, because we were a married couple down at the pole, we had some of the most spacious accommodations. So our room was about the size of a modest master bedroom, not really large, but we had 2 bunk beds pushed together with office space underneath. We had some drawer space and a little bit of carpet area. So that was really very nice. Other people had much smaller rooms, so quite a few people in the winter lived in the dome. And then there was also what was called the hypertat, which is kind of like a metal, almost like a tiny Quonset hut. In the summer, there was what was called Jamesways. I think they might have been tents from one of the wars, or Korean War, or some sort of war in the 50s. I'm not sure, but they were canvas. So even though they were heated, that's pretty roughing it.
Wow.
Can you repeat more of your question there?
Yeah, I wanted to know, well, for example, what are the laundry facilities like? What's the television like? Do they have internet up there, down there?
Right. Yeah, so we had, producing water is a whole other kettle of fish, but yes, we did have a regular washing machine, and we were allowed to do 1 load of laundry per week per person. So I had to, for my uniform for work, I'd have to wear it 2 days in a row, so it was pretty stinky. For TV, we had, it was basically VCRs and TVs, so, videos and just watching videos. The internet, we relied on several satellites, and so we had coverage for about 14 hours a day, sometimes better bandwidth than other times. So we were pretty isolated in that regard.
Did you happen to stay through any of the South Pole storms that we see on TV, the blizzards?
Yes, we definitely had whiteouts. The most dramatic now they're not really blizzards. It's when the wind gets up to about 30 miles an hour, I guess 50 kilometers an hour, then it kicks up the snow, because at the South Pole it's actually a desert. So we only have about 2 inches of precipitation in the form of diamond dust, 2 inches per year. But yes, I remember the first week I arrived, there was just a terrible storm, and everybody got the day off except for kitchen staff, and everybody had to be accounted for, and we actually almost lost two of our workers who were out wandering around. They got disoriented, and of course at the South Pole, if you get disoriented, that's really bad. So we were really lucky that they got found.
What are the medical facilities like?
Well, we had a place called Biomed, and it was not that large of a room. It was kind of, again, the size of a large, maybe a child's bedroom, a nice sized child's bedroom, and then in the back there was a machine for, you could take people's blood and measure it. We also had an ultrasound machine that wasn't working at all until we had a disaster. We had a really terrible situation with one of our doctors, and then 2 extremely smart technicians or science people on station were able to get it going. But it's pretty basic. Our doctor can check. He'll help us if we have minor injuries, right, or that sort of thing. But it's basic.
God forbid, in case of an evac, what happens?
If somebody needs an evac?
Yes.
Well, and during our year was the first winter medevac, and generally speaking, a medevac is not possible, but our doctor got a gallstone stuck.
Oh, gosh.
And fortunately, we had a nurse on station because of a previous doctor getting sick. If you remember Dr. Jerry Nelson got medevac 2 weeks before station opening. But anyways, the National Science Foundation and Raytheon Polar Services made a decision to evacuate our doctor, but they couldn't do it with the Air National Guard Hercules aircraft, so they actually hired Ken Borick out of Calgary, Alberta, to take 2 weeks in 2 planes to fly down to the South Pole. And they landed in a record-breaking minus 68 degrees Celsius, and they couldn't even see the horizon when they landed. So it was pretty incredible, and they almost didn't take off, but they did, and they brought us a new doctor.
Fascinating. We've got about a minute before I have to go for my final break. Would you go back?
I'd love to go back for a summer, but wintering for 8 months, where you're in, you're in an extreme environment, very isolated, with some people going crazy. It's pretty challenging. So I wouldn't winter again.
People go crazy?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say about 20% of the people on station we were worried about, and even me. I think all of us. You're on ice. You're not touching the earth. There's a sense that you're not grounded, and yeah. So, I mean, winter was an incredible time, but in terms of the stresses on the body, it's really hard on the body.
All right, please stand by, and you and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break as you and I wrap up this hour here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. X-Zone Nation, our guest this hour, Jennifer McCallum. She is the co-author, along with her husband, Dr. John Bird, One Day, One Night, Portraits of the South Pole. Their website, www.portraitsofthesouthpole.com. We'll be back. Don't go away. Broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond. You're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Demo.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com. Jennifer McCallum is my guest of this hour. Exonation, www.portraitsofthesouthpole.com. Jennifer, I understand that there's more than one South Pole.
That's correct. As a matter of fact, there's 6. Would you like me to tell you about them?
I really would.
Sure. Well, I would consider the most significant to be the Earth's spin axis. And it used to be synonymous with the geographic South Pole. So the spin axis, it's right at the South Pole, obviously, but it moves in nested circles and also in squiggles. So it's always on the move. Mm-hmm. But there's one thing really interesting about it, is that you can look at it from 2 reference points. One, you can look at it from the Earth reference point, and the spin axis is wobbling around. But if you look at it from outer space, the spin axis is firm, but it's the Earth that's wobbling. So if we move to the geographic South Pole, the geographic South Pole is a GPS, so a cartographic reference point, and it's created by very complicated mathematical models, and they keep averaging and they use star positions. So the GPS is a point, so that's 90 degrees south at the South Pole, and that's literally like a stake banged into the ground. But again, if you look at it from outer space, actually the geographic South Pole is wobbling all over the place. So it's kind of interesting. The next one is the South Magnetic Pole. Now, the South Magnetic Pole wanders, and it is about 2,500 kilometers from the South Pole, and so it's where the Earth's geomagnetic lines, they go vertical, so they go into the Earth at that point. And the South Magnetic Pole is based on the motion of the molten metal in the Earth's core. Now, the South Geomagnetic Pole, that's actually a mathematical model, so you can't locate it by measurement. But the South Geomagnetic Pole is significant because the aurora australis, they revolve around that pole, and that's located, I said by calculation, very near Vostok Station, the Russian base in Antarctica. The next one is the pole of inaccessibility, and that's more of a fun one. So all that is a calculation of the point in Antarctica farthest from all the coastlines. And incidentally, that's also near Vostok Station. And there is some interest from the astronomy community because it's actually even higher than the South Pole. And the final one is the ceremonial pole, and this commemorates the Antarctic Treaty. So it's got it, and it's a really fun place to be. There's a barbershop pole, and then there's a big mirror ball on top, and then in a larger circle there's the 12 flags of the original Antarctic signatories.
Fascinating.
And there you have it.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is so significant about the South Pole to the scientific community?
Well, I mean, it's significant both for astronomy and for doing studies of the atmosphere. So for the atmosphere, it's basically the cleanest place on Earth. You know, it's one of the most. It's really the most pristine place on Earth. Also, the poles are where climate change happens the fastest, so you see the changes. And because it's so clean and pure, atmospheric chemistry can be studied in its most natural state. and also the ability of the atmosphere to cleanse itself. And some good news is that the atmosphere can cleanse itself better than scientists originally thought, although that certainly doesn't mean that we certainly need to do everything we can in terms of climate change. Also, ice cores are taken at the South Pole and elsewhere in Antarctica, and they are like tree rings, and they preserve ancient atmospheres with precision. So they're kind of like an ancient library that we can consult. And so basically they can look back and see the climate record for as far back as 500,000 years.
Wow. Is the same work being done in the North Pole that is being done in the South Pole? And what is the difference of the research between the two poles?
Well, that is actually a much better question for John.
Okay.
Certainly, they are studying ozone in the North Pole and the South Pole. Certainly, there is a lot being done, but in Antarctica has the larger ozone hole.
Gotcha. What about some of the natural phenomena at the South Pole? What can you share with us?
I think one of the most amazing things is the aurora. I just and the evolving seasons. I mean, it's just one of the most exquisitely beautiful places ever. But just you're on 2 miles of ice. It's a plateau of ice extending for miles in every direction, and the sun rises and sets once per year, as I said, and the sun moves sideways. And another thing, because you're right on the spin axis of the world, you're always looking at the same stars. They're always there. So, and the moon rises for 2 weeks, and then it sets for 2 weeks. So while the moon is up, it kind of feels like you could imagine the sunlight on Pluto, and while it's down, you're just in this black void. And also the planets, they're up for half of their journey around the sun. So Mars is up for a year and then down for a year. Jupiter is up for 6 years and down for a year.
How did being at the South Pole affect your religious beliefs?
Well, I was raised Christian, and I would consider myself now more post-Christian, but at the same time, I'm very open to a religious experience. I think the South Pole, because I was so far away from everybody, you're 5% of the way to the moon. I think it gave me more freedom to think by myself, and it was a very challenging place to live. While it was so incredibly beautiful, it was very, very difficult at times. And I think I found an inner resiliency, and then to be immersed in the South Pole, like to go through a solstice. I grew up, solstice was bad because it was pagan, but then at the South Pole, all of a sudden you're at the solstice, and it's the darkest time of the year, and you just feel this connection to the ancient peoples who celebrated it. It was so visceral, and so I think somehow the South Pole helped me kind of let go of the religious beliefs that were negative and the negativity inside me, and it just kind of helped me see the universe as a playground, a place that I could explore, and a place that was safe to be.
As a musician, how did your experience at the South Pole affect your music? I'm always drawn to landscapes. I like to describe landscapes with my music, and so being immersed in the Antarctic landscape, which is kind of just scene. There's no scenery, there's no trees, no rocks. There's just sky and ice. And then there's these waves in the snow, and so it was kind of I was always immersed in this very, it sounds very sparse,
but it was actually a very rich world to me. It was very inspiring, and there was quite a number during the winter. There was quite a number of musicians on station, and so I wrote, and I did have a composition teacher back in Toronto. I'd send what I was working on to, and then I would do readings with people, and that was such a special experience. I also sang in a quartet and practiced. I remember practicing and basically crying, when the sun was about to set, because I was so frightened of the dark. But it always seemed like a lot of my experiences were mediated through music, and it would calm me.
How many people were on the South Pole at the time you were there?
Well, the South Pole is divided into two seasons, really, into summer and winter. And summer is defined by when it's warm enough for Hercules aircraft, the largest ski-equipped aircraft in the world, to fly into the South Pole. And then, so the 8 months of winter is when it's too cold for aircraft to fly in. So during the summer, there was approximately 225 people on station, and when I was earlier describing the activities, I was talking about the summertime.
Yeah.
And then in the winter, there was 50 of us on station.
You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour, Jennifer, so please stand by. Exonation, Jennifer McCallum is my special guest. We're talking to Jennifer about the book she wrote with Dr. John Bird, entitled One Day, One Night, Portraits of the South Pole. And we'll be back right here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network from our studios, not at the South Pole, but in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the shores of Lake Ontario. My name is Rob McConnell. Once again, Jennifer McCallum is my guest. www.portraitsofthesouthpole.com. Named one of the world's greatest psychics, Elizabeth Joyce is now giving readings worldwide via Skype. Elizabeth Joyce is recognized for her clairvoyant ability to help find missing persons, her analysis of dreams, past life regression work, mediumship, and her accurate predictions. Elizabeth has been a frequent guest on the X-Zone radio show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, now for several years. For an appointment with Elizabeth Joyce, call 201-934-8986 or Skype at elizabeth.joyce. And for more information, you can always visit Elizabeth Joyce online at www.new-visions.com. The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howe will expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes, finds a locket, or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, rel-mar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern, right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, and iHeartRadio. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone at xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV. And for all the great programming we have available for you, 724-365 on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit www.xzbn.net. X Zone Nation, my first guest tonight is Jennifer McCallum, along with Dr. John Bird. She wrote One Day, One Night, Portraits of the South Pole. Joining me now is Jennifer McCallum. And Jennifer, welcome to the X Zone.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
It's great having you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm a musician, and I am a church musician currently playing at a couple of local country churches, and I'm a busy mom raising two daughters.
What was the inspiration for going to the South Pole?
Well, I was working on my master's in music composition, and one day John burst in the door and said, do you want to move to the South Pole? And I was completely taken aback, and he explained a little more and said, well, I was just talking with my old PhD supervisor from the University of Illinois, and he's offered me a job there for a year. Do you want to go? And it was just right out of the blue. I couldn't believe it. And then he really didn't skip a beat, and he said, well, hurry up and start applying for jobs. You don't have any time to lose, and you can think about it while you do that. And I was like, well, okay. And then I did think about it, and I thought, it's been his childhood dream to go to Mars. So why not? Let's just go to the South Pole. I have no idea what I'm getting into, but let's do it.
Let me ask you, John said apply for jobs starting now. What kind of jobs would anybody apply for down on the South Pole?
Well, there's actually quite a lot of jobs. The United States Antarctic Program deploys about 5,000 people a year. So science and science tech type people can be funded internationally by the National Science Foundation, and then support staff need to be U.S. citizens. So there's lots of jobs. There's everything from just general work. I got a job as a dishwasher to network specialists, communication specialists, medical people, people who operate heavy equipment, construction people. It's just, lots and lots of people.
When people think of the South Pole, they think of one of the two most cold places on this planet. And to go down there, I must be honest with you, dear, I wouldn't want to go down there. I get cold here in Hamilton, for goodness sake. I'd probably freeze my tuchus off down in the South Pole. The title of your book is intriguing. One Day, One Night. Why is that the title?
Well, it's because the South Pole is actually at the very spin axis of the Earth. Different rules apply there. So where we have a 24-hour day-night cycle on the rest of the world because of that's how long it takes the Earth to spin.
Right.
The day and the night at the South Pole is determined by the yearly journey around the sun. So a day is actually 6 months, and a night is 6 months.
Oh, my gosh. How did that change in daytime, nighttime affect you physiologically?
Well, it was when I first arrived at the South Pole, it was very overwhelming, and just this constant daylight. It kind of, I almost felt like, the first week I was there, it was kind of like the sun was following me around. It was always the same height in the sky, and it'd be somewhere else, and you'd go to a party and come back out at midnight, and there was the sun, and I think it made it challenging for sleeping. It was crazy, and then when the sun went down and it was dark all the time, you almost got this sense of being in the movie Groundhog Day, the same day after, or same night, I guess, living the same day of your life over and over again. It was really strange, although I have to say the night was one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced in my whole entire life.
Share that with us.
Sure. The night was heralded by the sunset, and the sunset took about 2 or 3 weeks. And it was just evolving sunset clouds changing different colors. And then the final sunset, the sun, when it set, it actually came back up because of temperature variations and being refracted up again. And then it was in these gold shimmering bars. And then there was sparkles of purple and green and blue. And it was just this light show that went on for hours. And then it just dusk. It took about 2 months until we were in complete darkness, and the sky. It was like you were immersed in the sky. It seems at mid latitudes, you look and the sky is above you. At the South Pole, it felt like you were part of it, and there was a dimensionality to it and subtle colors to it. And then we were also there during the peak of the solar cycle, which is an 11-year cycle, so there's a lot more storms on the sun. So that meant the aurora, now down there it's the aurora australis rather than the aurora borealis, which is the northern lights. And they were incredible. They were brilliant greens and reds, and they danced, and it was like seeing speeded up clouds, and you see shapes in it. Like I remember, seeing this trumpet unfurling, and it was incredible.
How long were you down there?
Well, I was down there for just a little bit more than a year, and John arrived about a month after me because dishwashers were in higher demand.
Mm-hmm. What is life like down there? What do you do besides work and sleep?
Well, during the summer, a lot of it was work and then sleep, because I did work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. However, there was definitely a lot of fun to be had, and when John arrived, we got right down to kite photography and really got some incredible aerial views. Now, it was a bit challenging because we lived basically right at an airport, and so our first flight narrowly missed killing our camera with a large crane, but that was a lot of fun. There was construction going on, so we had tours of the construction, and they were tunneling deep under the ice. Not really deep, but around 30 feet down, and doing utility tunnels, and those were incredibly beautiful. You imagine just these ice walls, pristine ice walls. We played croquet outside. One fellow sunbathed regularly. I had no idea how he did that because it was very cold. John and I practiced headstands for a photo so we could flip it upside down and look like we were hanging off the bottom of the world. Expeditions were, expeditions were arriving. Tourists were flying in. There were science lectures, crazy parties. The Polies, as people are called that go to the South Pole. I've never been to any parties like it. Like, we all dress in fairly, basic, almost grubby clothing and so on. But at these parties, it was shocking how well people dressed up. And then also, I mounted one of my compositions called the Millennium Oratorio. So it was a kind of a short piece describing the how the universe was created. And so it was ideally for a large choir and a wind ensemble, but from the dish pit window, I got to meet everybody. And so I interviewed everybody and managed to get myself 12 musicians. So we mounted this. So it was a little challenging because I wasn't on anybody else's schedule, and people would often go to the bar and drink beforehand, before rehearsals. But in the end, we mounted it, and it was a lot of fun.
You and I have to take our first break, Jennifer. Thanks so much for joining us. Exonation, Jennifer McCallum is my special guest this hour, along with Dr. John Bird. She has authored One Day, One Night, Portraits of the South Pole, and the website is www.portraitsofthesouthpole.com. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, and, of course, iHeartRadio. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. And for all the programming we have available for you 24/7, 365 on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit www.xzbn.net. Jennifer McCallum and I will be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.